Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most astonishing, completely verifiable histories you'll probably ever come across. We are talking about the true story of a woman who literally defied an entire kingdom. You know, when we think of historical titans, our minds usually go straight to kings, generals, conquerors, right? But today, we're looking at a figure whose absolute best weapons were her intellect, her deep compassion, and just this unyielding dedication to healing. We're going to explore the life of Dae Jang Geum. We'll walk through the unbelievable timeline of her life, look at the immense systemic barriers she completely shattered, and talk about the lasting legacy she left behind. So, who is the real Dae Jang Geum? Well, if that name rings a bell, you are definitely not alone. Millions of people all over the globe know her from the massive hit K-drama Jewel in the Palace. I mean, that show was an absolute cultural phenomenon. But as with pretty much any television drama, the lines between historical fact and creative fiction can get, well, incredibly blurry. In this explainer, we're going to strip away all that TV glamour to uncover the actual, real woman behind the phenomenon. Because honestly, the truth of what she managed to accomplish during Korea's highly strict Confucian era is actually way more impressive than any fictionalized plotline they could put on screen. To really get a grasp on the incredible heights she reached, we actually have to start at her incredibly humble beginnings. Unlike the powerful, wealthy men who usually take up all the space in history books, Jang Geum wasn't born into nobility, not at all. She likely began her life in the royal court as a lowly palace servant preparing royal food. It was a grueling, totally behind-the-scenes role where, frankly, she was expected to be entirely invisible. She was essentially supposed to be a ghost in the palace machinery, just meant to work tirelessly from dusk till dawn without ever being noticed by the elite she was serving. But wait, a 15th century palace kitchen was absolutely not just some simple cooking space. These were highly organized, intensely rigorous institutions. The women working in here were immersed in an environment where they had to master completely immaculate hygiene, precise food preparation, and a deep understanding of nutrition. So for Jang Geum, this wasn't just about doing daily chores. This was essentially a high-stakes science laboratory. This intense, disciplined environment actually became the absolute foundation for what would eventually blossom into her incredible medical career. Without even realizing it at first, she was getting a masterclass in the very building blocks of human health and vitality. Okay, so how exactly does a cook make the massive leap to becoming a healer? Well, first, it started with relentless observation. Driven by just this intense curiosity, she wasn't satisfied with simply following the recipes she was given. She actively watched and took note of how different foods affected the energy and health of the people eating them. Second, she took that curiosity a huge step further, teaching herself everything she possibly could about herbs and traditional medicine. Finally, and this is the real turning point, her self-taught brilliance caught the eye of senior palace officials. Instead of keeping her locked away in the kitchen, they actually granted her permission to formally study medicine. I literally cannot overstate how incredibly rare and unusual this kind of opportunity was for a woman at that time. To truly appreciate how huge this leap was, we have to talk about the immense systemic friction she was up against. 15th and 16th century Korea was strictly, and I mean strictly, governed by Confucian principles. In this society, women were largely expected to remain entirely in the background and very, very rarely held any kind of authority. On top of that, medical practice, especially the prestigious medicine practiced inside the royal palace, was a fiercely guarded boys' club. The societal deck was entirely stacked against her, so every single step she took forward was a direct, unapologetic challenge to the established norms of her era. Look at this trajectory. Her upward mobility was just truly unprecedented. She starts out as a humble kitchen servant, completely breaks the mold to become a medical student, and then gradually overcomes all this deep-seated court prejudice to successfully treat members of the royal family. Now, to be fair, Korea did have female medical practitioners back then, known as Yunyeo, but Jang Geum achieved something on a whole other level. During the reign of King Jeongjong, she didn't just practice medicine, she completely mastered it, rising to the absolute peak to become the king's personal physician. No woman had ever climbed to such heights in the royal medical hierarchy. Never. And listen, this wasn't just some fancy title they handed out. It came with terrifying, crushing pressure. She was actively responsible for monitoring the king's health, meticulously preparing his medicines, supervising all of his treatments, and advising on his daily nutrition, which, by the way, perfectly utilized all those roots she put down in the kitchen. But think about the stakes here. One tiny miscalculation, one wrong herb, or even a poorly prepared meal could literally cost the king his life. And for her, that would mean a swift execution. Yet she handled these incredibly intense daily duties with such precision and care that she earned the ultimate, unwavering respect of the crown. That respect eventually culminated in something truly, truly extraordinary. King Jeongjong trusted her medical judgment so profoundly that he awarded her the unbelievably rare honorific title Dae, which literally translates to great. So she was no longer just Jang Geum, she officially became Dae Jang Geum, the Great Jang Geum. Getting an honorific like this directly from the king was an astonishing honor for anyone, but for a woman of her social standing, it was flat out revolutionary. It was the absolute validation of her life's work, her integrity, and her undeniable genius. Now, we definitely need to separate historical reality from all that television magic. If we just completely forget the novelist embellishments, the made-up side characters, and those highly dramatic court romances created purely for TV ratings, what are we left with? Well, we are left with the hard historical records found in the annals of the Joseon Dynasty. And honestly, even though these historical entries are surprisingly brief, they pack a massive punch. They officially confirm that yes, she existed. She successfully treated King Jeongjong, and she absolutely earned the title Dae. Everything else might be fiction, sure, but those core historical facts remain astonishingly impressive all on their own. Because of those undeniable facts, her legacy is still going strong centuries later. She represents absolute determination, the power of lifelong learning, deep compassion, women's empowerment, and sheer excellence in medicine. If you travel to South Korea today, you will see her memory deeply honored across hospitals, museums, and educational programs. Her story isn't just some neat piece of historical trivia. It is actively inspiring entirely new generations to pursue careers in medicine and public service. It just goes to show her impact is still very much alive and kicking today. Which really brings us to the core message of her life. Skill, dedication, and integrity can overcome even the strongest social barriers. The crucial takeaway from this explainer is that Dae Jang Geum didn't become legendary because she was politically ambitious or ruthlessly seeking power. Not at all. She became legendary by simply proving her worth, day in and day out. She showed everyone that immense, seemingly impenetrable societal barriers can absolutely be broken, not with force or manipulation, but through sheer, undeniable excellence and integrity. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. What impossible barrier will your dedication and integrity help you overcome today? Look, we all face our own versions of professional roadblocks or societal friction, right? But as the great Jang Geum proved, rising from a completely invisible kitchen servant to a legendary royal physician, the impossible is often just a matter of perspective, patience, and relentless learning. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this absolutely incredible piece of history. Keep pushing those boundaries, and I'll see you next time.